Awesome. So here's my intro to video editing. So this is just a refresh from Tuesday, and just a reminder that, the whole time you're thinking about your audience while you are shooting video, you want to think about them in your edit as well as, again, who do you want to watch your video? Are they on YouTube, social media, on your website? YouTube videos and if they're on your website, they're already interested, or usually you're going to post a how-to video on teaching them how to do a skill on YouTube or your website, and that can be longer content. But if you're doing a social media video, you really want to keep it short, because that, depending on your audience, might be some promotional content or trying to gain a new audience, as opposed to like educating people on an in-depth thing. Yeah, and just thinking, what's the point? Am I educating here? Am I selling something? If you're selling something, whether that be an idea, selling a behavior, that counts too. Or if you're like educating people step by step, that's going to be longer than selling kind of anything. So thinking about that in your edit. So yeah, this is not going to be a software instruction, honestly, because I use Premiere Pro, but that's a paid service, and I know a lot of people may not be able to do that or want to invest. And it's also like a professional grade software. And if you're doing, a handful of videos a year and it's not a main part of your job, it's going to be challenging to learn and fight with. Instead, I'm going to teach you skills that you can learn on any and use on any software. And that way, you can YouTube more than I could teach you in an hour for any of these softwares anyway. Like I said, I use Premiere Pro. If you have your company or you pay for the Adobe Creative Cloud, Adobe Rush is a great option. It's basically Premiere Pro Lite. So it's way more user-friendly. It has limited capabilities. So if you're doing professional grade videos, or when I say professional grade, you can still make professional looking stuff on Adobe Rush, but we need detailed edits. But honestly, yeah, if you're using, you can use free software like your iMovie or Movie Maker if you're on a Windows computer. There's DaVinci, I know we mentioned Vegas earlier. At the end of the day, you're telling a story. That's what you're doing here to get, whether you're educating people or trying to sell something, you want to tell a story to get people to care. And the software is just a hammer. I always tell my students, a hammer is not going to build the house for you. You still have to use it properly. You can still mess things up with the best hammer in the world. So it's really just your tool. And obviously you may need to YouTube and figure things out on the internet, how to use that tool. And if you're serious, LinkedIn Learning has some great courses that you can actually take, like 6 to 10 hour courses going into these software. If you're interested, I'm happy to share those resources with you later. So coming back from your shoot, so things that you should have coming back from our shooting video session. If you've chosen to do that style where you're going to have interviews, hopefully you have your interviews with some good sound, where you had a microphone running there. Or if you are, just going to be using text or narration, maybe you just have B-roll. So that video of people walking around doing things, your wide, medium, and tight shots. So just that footage that's anything that's not an interview. Hopefully you have sound attached to all of your clips as well. We're going to talk a little bit about selecting music. So that's another thing. And also a script, whether that be a script for your interviews and putting those together, or the script that you've maybe written. Maybe you wrote it before you went into the field if it was a how-to video. Or maybe you need to write it now, which is very normal in editing process, to write a script after you've shot the video, once you have a better idea of what you can get. Or maybe just putting some text on your videos. Either way, you're going to have to write it. So this is my favorite meme of all time. It can be really, if you've done it before, it's a frustrating process of, you're spending a lot of time just figuring out how to put it together, and that's totally okay. Don't beat yourself up if you are, just spending time moving things around and not really editing. It's a lot of it is figuring out how to tell the story. In the beginning, it may be figuring out where the buttons are, but, once you figure out where those buttons are, a lot of it's going to be, thinking about the best way to do it. So this is the overall editing order for really any, any project that you are going to be working on. So your first step is always organizing your files, watching, listening, and just figuring out what you have. Maybe you're editing something that somebody else shot, then this step is particularly important. Maybe you shot it yourself, just going through, hey, did my shots look good? Did my interview work out? Does it sound good? Is everything usable? Like, what do I have to work with in my edit? Because you really can't start until you've done that and maybe organized and labeled things and kind of sorted through that. Okay, so then you're going to be figuring out your story based on that. So if you are choosing that technique where you are using the interviews to tell a story, then you're going to be sitting there and picking out your sound bites. Sound bites are just little pieces of your interviews. We spoke about how you may have, a 15-minute to an hour-long interview that you're cutting down into just a 2-minute video. So you're going to be taking very, very short segments out of it. So figuring out, hey, what is the most interesting part here? And this is where you really have to learn to be objective, because we all think whatever we're talking about or whatever our field is the most interesting thing, and everything's interesting when we get attached to the story. But you really have to think like an audience member of like, okay, if this is going on social media, I have 1 minute to tell this. So I really need to just pick the best of the best, or, really cut down. And sometimes it takes like 3 rounds of cutting down. I like to put, I start by listening and what's the most interesting thing, what's the most compelling, what is the person I'm interviewing the most excited about, because that's usually a good indication that it's going to make for good video. And what do I have video for? Because at the end of the day, somebody may have a great story to tell, but if you don't have footage to support it, it's not going to make a good video. So sitting, looking through that, and yeah, writing that story. Or maybe this is the point. So this is where you'll be writing a script. So if you're doing the interviews to tell the story, writing a script would be just, picking out those sound bites, picking out, the 15-second or so chunks of interesting things that people say, and putting that together in an order that's going to make sense to your viewer. Maybe you need to put some text on the screen to explain some of the gaps. Maybe you need to record some narration. I highly recommend against using interviewer questions in your video, unless you are mic'd up too and you've got it set up like a fancy interview where both people are on screen there. You typically don't want to include interview questions. I know this is a crutch that newer storytellers kind of fall onto, is like, oh, if I just explain the context through including the question, it will make more sense. And it honestly just ends up looking more like an amateur video if the person's not mic'd up. If it's an occasional tool, but you typically want to avoid that, rather just record some narration or something like that instead. So then, the writing a script, or if you're just doing narration, obviously you write that narration if you didn't already, or just text on screen, figuring out, hey, what text am I going to do on screen here? What's too much? I can't put essays on screen. People can only read 1 sentence at a time while it's on screen. So really keeping it short and figuring out what that is. Then we're going to go into picking out the B-roll, which I'm going to talk in detail about, balancing audio and watching and exporting. So I'm going to go in detail into these things here. There we go. There's my chat. Great. Okay, Nicole, you said you're definitely interested in any courses, good resources you recommend to learn about more editing software. Yeah, so other than YouTube or the usual, if you're using Premiere Pro, like Adobe has some great tutorial videos on specific features. But honestly, if you just want to sit down and learn a software, I think LinkedIn Learning, so it's a separate service from LinkedIn, is amazing at all kinds of tutorials. It's kind of similar if you've heard of Masterclass or seen those ads for that on YouTube. It had kind of like that, but it's literally step-by-step into the software. At the end of the session, if we have some time, I'll pull up my account and show you. But you can learn anything from, like management styles and how to be a better communicator and how to, talk to your staff versus in-depth Premiere Pro, intro, advanced features. And you can actually get certificates. So this could be a great thing of like, hey, you can put on your resume, I am certified in Premiere Pro through LinkedIn Learning, and take the course and do that. And they're usually, I think the Premiere Pro one's like 6 to 8 hours for an intro. And 6 to 8 hours to go in depth into the software. It is unfortunately like a paid service, and maybe you could do a free trial, I believe, and maybe watch through the Premiere Pro ones or whichever software you choose, or do a short-term membership, and maybe get your organization to pay for it, because there's so much good content on there. That's probably my favorite resource other than, good old YouTube, but that is my favorite. Happy to share at the end. So yeah, as we go into shot selection, so when you're at the shot selection process, so that is choosing which video you're going to be showing while people are talking or you're talking, you have text. So you do not want to be putting these shots onto your timeline. So basically that's what you're editing on. If you're brand new to editing video, I'll show you a picture of a timeline, but this is where you're piecing everything together. You don't want to be putting that on there until you have written your story and know where your story is going, because otherwise it's going to take too long and you're going to go back and forth, really streamline your process. So when you are picking out your shots, your interview should be on your timeline first. So if you picked out which interviews are going to be on there, I would recommend picking like 15 to 25-second chunks of interviews. And that's gonna be really challenging because people may make 1 to 2 minute points, but if that's the total length of your video, you obviously have to cut that down. So really taking a few rounds to cut that up, tighten it up. And then you're gonna be basically say dog, see dog. I should have written that on the slide, but when you hear somebody talking about, when Nicole was talking about a controlled burn they're doing. So if you did an interview and said, okay, today we're out here doing a controlled burn, we started by setting on fire this corner of the land, then you want to show them setting on fire. And then we make sure to control the burn with, water. And then you want to show shots of people putting water on the fire or whatever, or we have secure perimeter first or whatever they're talking about. If you have footage to support that, show it. So otherwise it may as well be a radio story or a written story. So when you hear somebody talking about something, show it and show multiple shots of it. So if somebody says, if she says, okay, we control it by putting water on the perimeters, and again, I have no idea how this actually works, but putting water on the perimeter, then you'd show a wide shot of them putting water on the perimeter and then a close up of the water hitting the ground and things like that. So we spoke about shooting like you see, like you walk into a room, you see a wide shot, and then you look at medium shots and close-ups and you get your eyes start to focus on things. So you're doing this for your viewer. You don't want your viewer to see a bunch of wide shots and have to figure out for themselves what they're supposed to be looking at. If you want somebody to be looking at the water hitting the ground, show them that. And really by adding close-ups, you're going to be doing that. Like I said before, you want to do minimal pans. So that's camera movement, like a camera moving left to right, or up to down or something like that. Maybe one at the beginning, one at the end, or one at the beginning, one in the middle, but not too many of those. So just remember, you want to be using the best part of your shot only. Minimal shakes. If somebody walks in front, if it's out of focus, don't include it. Use only your best work. You're going to have a lot of stuff that's unusable. Even if you're a pro, you're going to have a lot of stuff that's unusable. So just make sure you're using the best part of it. And you're only going to be using 2 to 5 seconds. Before I said count to 10, and that's to give you wiggle room. You don't want to be using all 10 seconds of a shot. 5 seconds is an eternity in video land. The only time you can really use more than 5 seconds if there's a lot of motion, or you can leave somebody's face on screen for longer than 5 seconds because you want to introduce people. So you obviously want to show what they're talking about, but the viewer wants to see who they're listening to unless it's a narrator. So show them on screen, and then you want to be covering it with those shots that are 2 to 5 seconds long. Rule of thumb is basically how long does it take somebody to process the shot? Look at it yourself. Once you've had a chance to dart your eyes across the screen and process the shot, move on, because your viewers, once they've figured it out, our brains want constant stimulation in this age. So 2 to seconds is often more than enough time for your brain to process the shot. Doesn't sound like it, but it works, especially for a close-up. So most of your shots will be within that range. I'd say probably averaging around 2 to 4 seconds. So on that, yeah, you want to keep your story moving. So when I say your first shot is key, probably should have switched those two things and put that in the previous slide, but your first shot is going to be whether your viewer decides to watch your video or not. Maybe if they're on YouTube and they're watching a tutorial, they're going to give you a little more time than that. But especially on social media, if they're seeing a talking head, unless they know who that is, they're gone. If they see like a cool landscape or something on fire or like, you know, plants growing, they're interested in that or whatever it is, but something visual needs to start there. But then you need to keep it moving. So yeah, if your shots are taking too long to progress, your view, like we have the internet, we're just going to keep moving and find something else that's going to keep it moving faster. So yeah, so like I said, when I say 5 seconds is a long time for your shots, I'm talking about, you know, that one thing that's on screen, you can show the same thing in 3 shots. So if you're showing that fire again, and then putting water on a fire, you know, you could have a wide shot that's maybe 4 seconds long, then a medium shot that's 3, and a close-up that's 2, and show that same thing, but just keep the shots moving. Yeah, like I said, interviews can be up there for longer, but if you are, you know, if somebody's on screen and they're talking for 30 seconds, which is kind of a long stretch for a short video, you want to make sure that after like 10 seconds tops, you're starting to show footage while they're talking. So their audio is going to be playing, the audience has seen their face, they know who's talking, and then you want to be showing other footage while they're talking. Like I said, what they're talking about. So now if you are choosing to do text, so you're not doing any narration or any text that you use in video, rule of thumb, up long enough to read twice. So if your whole video is text driven, so that's a great tip for a social media video. Those are often like really catchy if they're just some text on screen. CNN does this all the time on their news feed. I mean, lots of organizations kind of do that for their quick, punchy social media videos. That's the rule of thumb. If you can read through it quickly twice, usually the viewer can process the video, read through the line, and comfortably understand what's going on. Nothing's more frustrating than just moving on and you missing text. So give your viewer enough time, but not so long that they're bored of staring at it. And just remember that it's great if your text looks cool, but if you can't read it, it's useless. So make sure that there's enough like contrast. If you've got a dark background, use light text, move it around the screen, that type of thing to make sure it's readable. Whereas if you have narration, you know, you're not going to be on camera at all. And usually like you can tell if somebody's narrating. You know, viewers, we've been watching content for a long time. So it's pretty easy to tell if there's a narrator or an interviewer, or if somebody who's being interviewed, but the same rules apply. Your face may not be on there, but you want to be showing what you're talking about and keeping those shots moving. Okay, so next, so now you're kind of at the point where you've got your story picked out, which again, I know I kind of go over that process very briefly, but I spend like weeks on this in my in-person classes or any of my classes of working on how to tell a story. So that's probably honestly the longest part of your process. And then you've picked out the visuals and you visually support it. Now you want to maybe add some music. Social media videos, highly, highly, highly recommend that you add music to them as background music, even if you do have narration and sound bites. And yeah, so things to watch out for is copyright. I mean, you can do some Googling on this. Again, I spent a whole lecture or 2 on this. There are exceptions, but for safe, like just to be safe, do not use any popular or mainstream music. You know, if you put it on YouTube, if you're either going to get ads on your song or they may take it down, or if the rules change, copyright law is an absolute mess. It changes all the time. So you're going to be way safer using either YouTube Audio Library. So if you type into Google YouTube Audio Library, they have a free music library that they update all the time where you can download music and use it on the platform and not worry about being taken down, because basically they got tired of people stealing music. So they put their own music library together. Another one's Free Music Archive, FMA. You can also pay for services if you're doing this professionally. Again, I can also give some resources there. We use FirstCom, there's Artlist, where you can pay like a $10 a month subscription or $20 a month or whatever it is, to get access to more music and modern music. And yeah, I mean, music's so subjective, but just match the mood of your story. You know, keep it instinctual. Just think like, hey, if my story is, you know, happy, like I want to pick happy music, or if it's neutral, I want to pick something that's like building or whatever. I know this seems like super intuitive to say, but I see so many videos where, you know, people have put like happy music when people are talking about serious topics. I'm like they're talking about people's houses being lost, and this is a really peppy song, and my brain's confused and I'm very uncomfortable watching this video. So take some time to pick it out. You know, you're never going to make a video where everybody loves the music, but pick something that, you know, matches the mood there. Okay, so here, don't be intimidated. This is what a Premiere Pro timeline looks. Oop, nope, that's the next slide. This is what a Premiere Pro timeline looks like from one of my projects. So I can kind of explain a couple things to you, what I've been talking about here. So if you're using Rush, if I could stop clicking pause there, it's going to be a simplified version of this, but no matter what editing software you're going to use, it's going to be some derivative of a timeline like this. This may look like chaos, but honestly, this is a straightforward story. There was no effects. This is just interviews, and footage and music. So to kind of break down what all these things are. So in the intro here, where my mouse is, that is like I introduced the video on camera here. So on this top level is video, and on this bottom level is audio. Again, that's going to be pretty standard across almost all editing software. Is video is going to be on top, audio is going to be on the bottom there. So then on this bottom layer here, so not bottom, like I guess it's you know, where you see all the thumbnails and pictures. The one below here, this is where all my interviews are. So there's all the sound and the waveforms attached to my interviews. So I put those all on my timeline first. This is the timeline, and tell my story that way. And then I start layering on top of it footage to support what people are saying. So this was a hummingbird story that I did for the National Park Service. Yeah, if anybody's curious, I'm happy to give Heather the link to that so you can kind of see what this video actually looks like. But yeah, so I have my interviews. I would leave them on camera here. That's these pink layers are text. And I would have her on camera for approximately 5 seconds. And then she spoke about, you know, getting, you know, the community involved. So I showed her working with people in the community. You know, then in here, where they were talking below about how they banned hummingbirds and how they, you know, put it around their feet, make sure that they don't hurt the bird. And I showed footage of them doing that, and so on and so forth. So you'll notice here that I brought sound down with, there's multiple layers of audio. So there's multiple layers of video. And in Premiere Pro, the way it works is that if you have multiple layers of video, the one on top is going to be the one that you see. Whereas with audio, if you have multiple layers of audio, all of it's going to play at the same time. So now if you're using a more, you know, if you're using a free software or a more light version like Rush or I'm not sure, I haven't used Movie Maker or iMovie in a long time, but some of them are limited in the layers. So you may not be able to put layers like this. You may only have one layer to work with for simplicity reasons. So in that case, just make sure that, you know, the audio is playing and you can just put the footage on top there and just stack it all in one layer here. It doesn't matter, it's still gonna look the same to a viewer because you're still only seeing one shot at a time. Same with, usually most editing software will allow you to have multiple audio layers, or at the very least one and a song and like a layer for music, and allow you to add music in. If possible, if your software allows and if you have the ability to do so, add the sound that comes with your B-roll. Like I said on Tuesday, you know, if somebody sees a hammer hitting the ground, they expect to see a sound, hear a sound with that. So you want to have that playing, but when you edit your audio, it's just going to be lower than when you put it down initially. So basically all this does is it makes your video feel real. You're going to have to spend time and make sure that it's in the background. Your viewers should never think about the sound in your video. honestly, like if nobody thinks about your sound and your editing, you've done a good job. Because when people start noticing it, it means something's wrong. So if people don't notice their sound, that's great. But if it's missing, they're going to feel disconnected from it. So yeah, and this green layer, this is just the music track that played throughout there. And then all these little things, I'm about to talk about audio editing. So all these little lines here in the audio is me adjusting the audio levels. So no, where did my sound? There we go. That's where it was. So when you are editing sound, you always want to balance your dominant audio first. So basically what I mean by that in simplified terms is if somebody is talking, that needs to be the loudest sound. So you always want to, once you've put it on your timeline, you know, maybe even before you start putting any B-roll on, if you know how to isolate sound in the software, that's great. Well, you want to make sure that that's all at a consistent level so that while you're listening to that, you don't have to adjust the volume. Then as you add the other sound layers, so here, so as I add these, I'm going to turn my music and my natural sound lower so that they're just in the background. The viewer's not thinking about them. They're kind of creating a mood, but you're not paying attention to it. So basically your goal is for your viewer to not have to adjust the audio. When they watch their video, they should set it at the beginning of the video and not have to touch it again. If you find yourself having to adjust your audio throughout your video, go through and adjust it so that you don't. Honestly, you should be editing each audio clip individually if your software allows. Most software should allow that. And if you're having trouble, I mean, there's so many resources online, like Google, how to balance audio, that's the technical term in X software. You know, how to balance multiple layers of audio here, and they can go through that, but it is normal to have to adjust every single clip. Now, if you don't have any narration and you're just using text, your music is going to be louder than, you know, the sound of the hammer hitting the ground or whatever. So that would be your dominant audio. But yeah, so the balancing sound is a tedious part of it. So just don't forget about it. It's probably the thing that my students struggle with the most. So if you really are fighting with it, it's okay. You know, have somebody listen and be like, hey, can you hear everything everybody's saying? Or just have somebody watch it. And if they say, hey, I couldn't really hear it, just awesome. What do they think of the sound? And they may be like, oh, well, I couldn't really hear the person talk, or that sound of the hammer was super distracting. Edit it that way. Okay. So here I'm kind of getting over to my overall don'ts and my favorite. I miss Grumpy Cat and the memes and the social media posts. My favorite one to use my students. So overall don'ts is don't use a lot of transitions. So I haven't really spoken about this yet, but transitions are those things that we used to use in PowerPoints in the early 2000s, and, you know, video transitions where you have like the screen wipe across, or maybe you have a page turn, or maybe, you know, you can add all these things in the software. You do not want to be doing this. So if you've been doing this for years and you're kind of comfortable with it, by all means, this would be an advanced topic to cover. I do not let my intro students do it. And for my editing class, I don't let them use them until the end of the semester, because newer video editors are like, oh, I just put clips on a timeline. I feel like I need to show somebody that I edited this. And then we have this tendency to put star wipes and all these things. And honestly, what it ends up doing is making your work look like a new editor did that. And it's totally okay. I know a lot of you are new editors, but these are just tricks to make your video look like you aren't new. So these little things are just going to make it stand out, like adding more close-ups, like having less pans, easy things to just make it look more professional for that. So don't do those. Just putting two shots next to each other is great. You are telling a story. That is what your editing is. You do not need to add special things. That is an advanced thing that has a time and a place, but I guarantee your video is going to be better without them until you've learned how to use them. Yeah, so don't use like pointless shots. You're going to come back with a bunch of footage, and maybe you climbed up a tree to get this really cool shot, except it has nothing to do with your story. So you're going to feel attached to that, and you'll be like, I worked so hard and it's so cool. But if it has nothing to do with your story, you don't want to use it. Other things is, yeah, using shots with mistakes. You're going to have focus issues. You're going to have shots that are out of focus. You're going to have somebody walk in front of your camera. You're going to get distracted by something, or something's just not going to look good. You're going to have a thumb in it. Whatever it is, it's okay that you did that. Pros make mistakes all the time. You just don't know they do because they don't show it in their edit. Yeah, like I said, minimize those pans, keep those still shots. I'll get to jump cut in a second, but don't forget about audio. So when I say jump cut, a little tip. So here, when you see I'm changing sound bites here. So I have people interviews. I have my interviews on this layer. And basically, if you cut a sentence out of an interview, and we do this all the time, we see on vlogs and YouTube videos where somebody is talking and they mess up and they just cut it out and cut out their mistake and leave it on screen. So cutting out your mistakes is great, but you actually, when you cut a mistake out of somebody talking, you actually don't want to show that on camera. It's going to look more professional if you show some B-roll video over that. So for example, here, in this soundbite. So he made a little, he either made a mistake or he went off topic, or I had to put two things together. It happens all the time. I put some B-roll over there so you can see him jump. It kind of looks like they're glitching. So you want to avoid that if you can. And yeah, so don't forget audio. Remember, audio is super important. Overall do's is, put your best shots first. If you have some really pretty shots and some really good looking things, put them in the start of your video. It's going to keep your viewer around. Only include the good stuff. Like I said before, don't include those mistakes. Just because you or somebody shot it does not mean it needs to be in your video. Use those close-ups that you worked so hard to get. Balance the audio of every shot and tell awesome stories, because at the end of the day, you're out here to sell something, to educate somebody, whatever the purpose is of that video. It's easy to lose sight of that when you get hours into your edit and be like, oh, I have to think about audio and I have to think about which shot and what am I doing? But just remember your overall goal. And especially when it comes to length, sometimes it's easy to be like, oh, but all this is so important. I know I said I would do a minute video, but it needs 5 minutes. Think to yourself critically, is somebody genuinely going to watch this who doesn't do your job? Is somebody genuinely going to watch 5 minutes of whatever this content is? If it's an educational video and they're trying to learn something and they're seeking out, how to protect their house from fires, yeah, I bet they could spare 5 minutes to do that if they, got sent that video, because they're in a high fire risk area. Somebody who has like a stake like that in the video, absolutely. But in terms of somebody scrolling through social media, chances are very few people are going to watch that. So just keep that in mind as you're editing. But yeah, overall, that's my overall do's and don'ts. So now, as I said before, here's my email. Feel free to find me on LinkedIn. And yeah, I've left ample time for any questions if you have any. Yeah, so Heather posted, I don't know if you guys can see it in the chat, but Melissa was not able to be here today, who was here with us on Tuesday. And she had the question of, while people are working remotely, what's a good way to record audio interviews that they're going to overlay with stock footage? She's wondering if she should write a script, ask participants to send it to her, do a Zoom call, and she's making 1 to 3 minute promo videos to highlight various outputs and working groups, etc. So what I would recommend, you can go about this a couple ways, and it kind of depends on the know-how of the person that you're working with. Zoom can be great because you'll have a little more control. You can kind of coach them through. If the audio sounds terrible, you can be like, hey, do you have some headphones you can plug in that maybe have a microphone attached to that we can work with? Or maybe can you hold your microphone closer, or can you turn that fan off in the background, and you can help them through that. So that's going to be a little better. So that's the nice part about a Zoom call, is you can control that. However, some of the microphones attached to things may be limited. So another thing, honestly, like iPhones, Androids, whatever, if you have like a phone from the last 4 years and it hasn't had the microphone damage, all the companies have spent millions of dollars figuring out how to put a microphone into these things. It's insane. So, I mean, this makes a great microphone on the fly. I mean, I think my first microphone cost like $15 from Radio Shack, and this is at least 100 times better than whatever that was. So, that could be a great way, is just having them record audio onto their phone and emailing it to you could be a good one. Yeah, like, so should I, and I mean, in terms of like writing a script, so if she's doing promo videos, I recommend against writing somebody a script, because unless they're a professional voice artist, if you write somebody a script, they are going to read it. You know, it's going to sound robotic and just unnatural and not make a good promo. Maybe asking them questions, be like, hey, can you tell me about your job, or what you do, or what you're excited about? It's going to sound more natural. So I recommend against writing a script for anybody who's not a trained voice artist. Having them answer questions, you can guide them. We can ask leading questions and things like that. But yeah, so my recommendation is Zoom and coaching through it, trying to troubleshoot with them, or recording audio on their phone. And maybe you could do both. Maybe you could run a Zoom call on their computer and just have their phone close to them recording it, and do that. That's what I recommend there. Cool. And then we're hosting field basic activities this fall and hope to capture them on video, share with the launch. Okay, any tips? Cool. So tell me about those field activities, Heather.
Yeah, so instead of our big conference this fall that's going to be put off for a year, but we have groups in 4 different locations around the region. So Ethan and his folks in Montana are going to be doing a field-based series of tours and interactions, outdoors. There'll be one in Utah as well, one in Wyoming out in a national forest, and then Alan's co-collaborator folks are going to be doing some virtual events, and we want to be able to capture important segments of these, so that then we can share them at a meeting later on where more people will join virtually from lots of different points. So wondering if you have any tips for when you've got large groups of people in locations, lots of motion maybe, or, some part of the field, the activity might be outdoors, some part might be indoors.
Yeah. So large groups, in terms of filming, I would recommend, it's great to capture the energy of large groups. So I would, make sure that you just have leave a camera running for a minute at least of just the whole room. So you can kind of, people who aren't there, or people get a recap of the whole event and what's going on there. Maybe showing some faces and close-ups, but all that footage tends to look kind of generic after that. So I would probably, if you're going to do interviews, definitely pull people away from the group. You're just going to have problems with audio, unless you have a really good mic. Even so, stepping people aside to do interviews and getting them away from the action is going to be the best thing to make sure you get that good audio. And then, I would say, if you can, the person who you do interview, if you could have them explain what activity they're doing in the field, and, kind of pick a few people to focus on. You can show the wide shots of people getting involved, but pick, 2 or 3, people who maybe that are going to be good on camera, or will help you, and focus on them, do their interview with them, and film what they're doing with the wide, medium type shots. I think with things like that, I also find myself, it's so easily to get, kind of the squirrel mentality is oh, there's something interesting here. Oh, there's something interesting here. And then you just end up with a bunch of random footage, and you're okay, this doesn't make sense because there's a lot that happened this event, and just really okay, cool. We have our wide shots to establish a scene, but focusing it into small chunks and 1 or 2 or 3 people that are the focus, because otherwise it can just get unmanageable. So that's my tip there.
And would you also have somebody taking still shots as well to kind of get some of those close-ups or small groups that you could weave in later?
Yeah. So honestly, if you can have like somebody else do still photos, that's gonna be easy. I mean, you can always pull screenshots. Sometimes that doesn't always work, like still images from your video. But honestly, if you are working on doing a video and it's probably not your only job there, thinking about doing video and stills, it's just a lot. You know, even for me, when somebody says, "Hey, can you take some pictures?" Like, and from this event, I'm like, okay, if I have an hour with them and I have to do a whole video, like chances are I can pull some screen grabs, but it's going to decrease the quality of the video because I'm going to be thinking about two different things. So if you can get somebody else to like grab some things, that'd be great. And honestly, in terms of still photos and video, um, they're definitely better than no visuals. Like they're a great backup to have. So if you're like, oh no, I didn't get a shot of this exec that was there or some important person, like, did you get a still photo? You know, totally better than not having something. But I would use that as your backup plan, because if you have actual like video, even if it's a still shot of like people doing something with minimal motion, it's just going to look better in a video than a moving slideshow. So, yeah, like typically, you know, you could have photos in like a photo gallery because some audiences are just like, I don't want to watch a video. Like, let me see the pictures of who was there and what was going on. So it could be maybe like a slideshow if it's in your website and then a video below or something. But yeah, I'd only incorporate it in your video if you kind of run out of options.
Great. Thanks, Jessie.
Sure.
Questions from others?
Just kind of piggybacking on the earlier question, do you have any specific apps that you recommend for recording on your phone?
Yeah, so in terms of apps, let me look on here and see if I have anything. I don't have anything specific for video recording. I mean, you can do some like basic editing on your phone and things, and just, I mean, in terms of recording audio, just usually the voice app that comes on the phone works perfectly. And then you can just email it to yourself. But I will say, if you're recording on your phone, I would look at the settings. Let me just check where mine are here. So, so if you, like, if I show my iPhone here, that's currently recording the back of my hand. So like in the top left-hand corner there are some settings. It's Jessieception. You can like kind of change the settings on there. So like I can switch it to 4K video, which is basically going to be like a higher quality footage with bigger files. And you know, you can learn about the different recording things and just looking through the settings in your phone to see if there's anything that can help you there. Yeah, in terms of apps per se, I really don't, not for video anyway. For recording, I typically don't. But that said, I also use my camera, like my Sony A7 most times. So I'm not the best person to ask about that. But yeah, like in a pinch, I've totally just used my phone and adjusted the settings and done it that way. Cool. So I'll quickly share my screen again. I'll keep my camera on just to show you the tutorial I was talking about before. So this is my LinkedIn account. So I don't know if this comes up to everybody or if you have to have an account first for LinkedIn Learning, you may need to sign into that. But there, just off of LinkedIn, it used to be called lynda.com if you'd ever heard about that, but LinkedIn bought it. And so basically, it is just, yeah, it's a tutorial site where you can take courses and get certified. These are customized to me. It's like one person crew, video production tips and tricks. And there's something that's an hour long. You can get 2 minutes things. There's like achieving happiness and success, or you could type in whatever software. So Premiere Pro. And so here they'll have what's called their essential training, and they do this for pretty much all video editing software, all Adobe Suite, like so many things. They have millions of videos on here. And usually the essential training, you know, course. So here that will say, you know, 7 hours and 44 minutes. And that's a course. So you can get certified at the end to be like trained in it, or you can cherry pick. So like they'll have playlists for things. And you know, there it'll like go over, like maybe you just want to know about editing audio, then they'll have like basic audio editing, and you can just watch those videos. Or, you know, if you like want to type something specific, like you want to learn about color correcting, or any issues you're having. Ooh, there we go. So I just think it's a great resource for all things learning. You know, if you know something, like if you know, if the software that you're using, I don't know that this would be the best choice, like since you have to pay for it. If you could get it for free, because I get it for free for the university and we assign it to students, so I think it's great. But if you don't really want to pay for it, I mean, YouTube's a great resource. Adobe Forums is a great resource, or just any forums in general. But if you're at a point where you're like, I don't even know what I don't know, like I don't know where to start my search because I don't even know what a timeline is. Like I don't know what questions to ask. This is great because it works you through it. Like it tells you like, hey, this is a good order to learn in, because usually YouTube videos are like, you know, you're a lot like, video makers who are like, let me teach you this one specific thing. And then, you know, they may not give you background info, whereas this is catered towards beginners. Or if you're advanced, you could like take an advanced course on there. I mean, I use Premiere every single week, and it's just such a deep software. There's always things that I don't know. So I will always just go through here and maybe I want to learn more about something. So I think that's a great resource. Not that these are the best videos in the world by any means. That means I'm redoing a lot of them. But if you guys are interested, let me find my channel here quickly and I'll show it to you. Okay, so I mean, since I'm an instructor, I record a lot of my lectures and stuff on here. And I have like short, like, hey, how to start Premiere Pro videos and things. Like how to start, because Premiere Pro is super fussy. So if you are using Premiere Pro, I have a lot of like, hey, specific tutorials for my students that are like short, like, hey, this is how you balance audio for a documentary, or this is how you fix audio, or, you know, this is how you export a project. Like here's some settings to get it onto YouTube. So if you have specific things, I may have little tutorials there, which teach you how to export in 3 minutes and save you a hunt. Yeah, like you said, they're just like screen recordings of me working through that. But yeah, so there are some comments and resources there too.
Thanks again, Jessie. We're on our way to being out there with our cameras, filming away.